Really?
We're doing great.
Good man. Hey, my name's Connor, by the way. I'm just kind of tagging around in the background here.
Ah,
Yeah, he's working
cool, nice.
on this project. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, I have an experience working with PHP and Node.js, and he's have had experience working with Ruby on Rails. Uh, I just want to keep the introduction very brief so that you can have your sleep.
Okay, yeah.
And thank you for taking time out on such short notice.
No, that's okay, guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Okay, so we're currently building. We actually have released V1 of our application. It's a social networking website
Mhm.
aimed at small businesses. Uh,
Okay.
our current user base is not so much, but the after the upgrade, we're going to launch in certain parts of US and try to get more traffic. And we currently have. Uh, it totally depends on the response of the users and response of the areas. It totally depends on that, the number of users we get. Anyway,
Mhm.
currently our main application is in MySQL and PHP, and our
Okay.
architecture is such that we're using. Are you familiar with the term push-based and pull-based feeds architecture?
Yes. Do you mean you mean something like fan out and read or fan out and write? Is it the
Exactly.
same thing?
Yeah, we're
Hmm.
not using fan out, but we're using pull-based architecture. We just log in
Okay.
one MySQL table, everything related to all the feeds. So one row represents one feed item, and
Okay.
when a user requests his or her feeds,
Hmm.
depending on the user and the connection between whoever posted the feed, we select the
Hmm.
number of feeds that are supposed to be available to him. And the
Okay.
second step, it's basically in the feeds table contains a normalized data,
Hmm.
only IDs of all the businesses and users,
Okay.
and the feed. And so in the
Hmm.
second step, we hydrate the feeds and attach data to it.
Hmm.
So, but now the two questions that I want you to answer for me is whether to use fan out or pull base, and whether to keep normalized or denormalized data. The reason why I am more interested towards the denormalized data is because we are separating out and moving towards service-oriented architecture in which we have a separate user service and separate business service, and now we
Okay.
want to make a separate feed service.
I
Uh,
see
in
that.
which
Hmm.
normalizing in which normalizing the data adds an additional cost to every fetch request.
Hmm.
So
Okay. So I just have one question first. So when you generate these feeds, is it based on like combining a lot of like different activities that happened before, or is it just like pulling that list of activities and just dumping that on the screen?
no, it combines all the stuff that happened before, just like what you see in Facebook feeds.
Okay. So like for an example, if I'm following both of you and you two act on the same target, I should be like I should see a summarized version of like those two actions upon the same target, like as in a story or something on Facebook.
I actually don't understand your question.
Uh,
Use a different. Can you give me a different example?
sure. So assuming I post a photo to Facebook, right? That's an action. I'm performing an action.
Okay.
And then later on, one of you two comment on that photo, and the other one likes it. These are like three different actions upon the same target, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm asking is if we're just dumping the three of them this response or this service as three different actions, or if we're actually combining them together onto a single target and then just returning that target and all the actions that happen upon that target.
For now, I was keeping comments and likes separate to all of the feed events. There were 6 or 7 different kind of feed events. User records something, a user connects with someone else. So these were examples of feed events. I was treating comments separately. Each comment and each like was attached to one single feed event. So basically, to answer your question, there will be one feed event in this case,
Hmm.
and two comments on that feed event. But now I also want to change that and go to a more sensible architecture as far as commerce and likes is concerned.
Hmm. So the way I worked on like some previous feeds I built, it was basically I would just try to flatten like all kinds of events into like if you could find like a structure, you could save like all events no matter what, in a way that you could just use the IDs as reference to whatever you're doing. So the way I would do the way I did before, is there any way I could type in something? Maybe I could screen share.
Can you use screen share?
Okay, so I'm gonna screen share my Vim, and then I can just show something to you guys.
Yeah, screen share is second one from the top on the left side.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, can you guys see it?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Cool. Uh, so one structure I like to so this is like an example of something I would do. I would do something like target ID and an actor ID maybe, and the action type, or yeah, the action type, and something like the action ID and a timestamp. That's the way I've done it before because it's a way to do it that you can denormalize the data and you don't actually have, and you could do all of your joins later based on like just breaking this kind of a structure down. So it could be something like the target could be a photo, the actor ID could be Netto, the action type could be a like, the action ID could be the ID of the like ID, and timestamp could be 12. It could be a Unix timestamp, so anything. So the way I'm used to do, I usually create these kinds of, I call this timelines. So this could be, a timeline could be just an array of these guys, right? Something like this. And then it could be anyone, it could be John
Sure.
or whoever. So you could just log all the events the same way you're doing that. So from what I got, that's pretty much what you're doing already, right?
Yep.
Something like this. So now one thing. So depending on it all depends on your traffic now. And so, and how many followers and followees are we talking about? I mean, do you think like there's going to be like 100 followers for whatever company that's posting content or anything? Because like that's one of the key questions to decide if you should do a fan out on write or fan out on read. That depends. So because the way I did before when I was building the newsfeed for Atrix, we started with fan out on write. So every time a user would perform an action, we would push that action onto every follower. So on every follower's feed, and that was getting too expensive because some people had 16,000 followers, some other ones had like 2,000 followers, and though it was fast to push an action onto to one follower, it would take too long to do it for everyone, and you had to do it in threads, and it would get super complicated. And so for this guy that had 16,000 followers, it could take up to like half an hour for every action that guy made. And because he was such an active user, he had 16,000 followers, he would do stuff all the time. So it would be like super hard to like keep track of all of that. So because of that, we decided to do it the other way around. So every time me as a user enter the website, I'm just going to find what are all the relevant timelines. So I'll fetch the timelines for everyone I'm following, but only the most relevant ones. So if it's, it depends on what means to be an active user in your service. So if an active user is someone that shows up once a week, maybe you want to get only the people that've been around in the last 3 weeks. Because if they're like someone, if you, because you probably don't want to show something that happened like 3 or 4 weeks ago on the first page, right? The first page of the feed. So that's also like another thing to do. So let me just write it down here. So fan out on write versus fan out on read. So you usually go for write if you have like very few followers.
Yep.
You go read if you perform a lot of actions and have a large number of users to receive. Yeah, not the action to receive the feed. Something like that. You can write it different later. So what else? It would basically be something like. So I don't know. Can you tell me a little bit more about like, how many users are we talking about? What kind of actions are we talking about?
So we have around 8 different kinds of action that can be if user updates his skill set, user changes the types of a business, changes updates his display picture, and then a user recommends a business and user connects to a business. And finally, one is direct feed post.
Mm-hmm.
That's public post is bit shown to every user. We don't have specific collections per se. We have come up with a mechanism to
Mm-hmm.
map a lot of users uh, between each other. So at one time, you can say that a single user can have around uh, 200 to 300 followers.
Okay. 200, 100 to 300, and so a very active user to your site. How many times a week would that user show up?
At the moment, the website is in beta, so
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, this profiling cannot tell us anything. I mean, there are users who post uh, 10, 10, 12 times a week. I mean, that's the most we've gotten so far.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but we're not building a website based on what we have so far. We're building for after the push that we're going to make in a
I
couple of.
see.
It might help to know as well that our network's a little bit different than some others. Say with Facebook, where it really is truly kind of global in a sense, you can connect
Mm-hmm.
with people across the world. Ours is very much focused on neighborhoods, so we
Mm-hmm.
actually kind of subdivide our networks into smaller, just neighborhood-based networks that contain maybe 200 to 300 businesses max. So you're looking
Oh,
at
that's.
sub-network with 200 to 300 people, and if that helps at all with your reputation.
Oh yeah, that helps a lot because you're kind of like federating it. You could just, I mean, you could have different servers for each one of the federations. So that makes it much easier because you can scale it like much easier now. And that's good. That's actually great to know.
One last thing to note over here.
Hmm.
There is a mechanism to uh, create a cross neighbor connection.
I see. You could also do that.
But they
Okay,
are obviously they're going to be fewer than the number of connections within a neighborhood.
I see. Okay. Oh, that actually gives me like a lot of insight. That's actually a good starting point.
Okay.
So you see, with these actions up here, the ones I'm selecting right now.
Mhm.
So how, I mean, in terms of like latency, how soon would you expect to see an update? Would you want to see it right away? Does it matter if it shows up maybe 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 30 minutes later?
Uh,
It
I
kind of
think
depends almost. So we have some things, for example, we have urgent alerts, which are kind of like safety and security updates.
Mm-hmm.
Those really need to be out within under a minute for a neighborhood.
Okay.
and same goes for notifications regarding uh, comments and supports. But for the rest, for the events that you've written on your screen from
Mm-hmm.
line 23, I guess we can go with, we can easily go up to 5 or 10 minutes of latency.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also good to know, because I mean, if you consider that like some of them are very sensitive, that means they have to be pushed out right away. So, and in that scenario, maybe fan out on read doesn't actually work for you because you would not expect the user to just go to the page and see it. If you want to send it as a push notification, if you want to send an email right away,
Yeah.
or maybe that's not even part of the feed. So it depends. Like it's a matter of like a decision. If you want to make it part of the feed, if you want to make it as a notification that gets triggered right away, and then later on makes it to the feed. It's also like another decision. But from what I'm hearing, maybe fan out on write is actually it's not a bad option. It could actually be the one. So maybe you could architecture it in a way that that's the first idea that comes to my mind. Like a very simple architecture would be something like this: user X. Like so is there any name like a domain name for a user? Is that do you guys have a name for? So just I don't call it user or call it maybe owner, like I don't know, resident.
User.
User's fine. Okay, so it would be something. A user acts, creates an action. The action gets saved. Then that action gets pushed onto everyone's feed. Not everyone's, but to relevant feeds. Okay, so the way I would do this, so one way you could do it is that every time a user performs an action, you can, so let's call this A. Let's call this B. And this is C. So what we could do would be something like A, you could live in context of the request, a web request. So it could be a click somewhere, it could be someone filling out a form, and then you could just write it right away, right? And B, yeah, are you guys familiar with background jobs?
Yeah,
Yep.
within the Ruby world, sure.
Yeah, cool. I don't know how it's done on PHP or but anyway, or Node.js. But I will make this a background job, and then you could actually solve B and C.
You would make B a background job.
B and C, they could actually be part of the same background job. Or I mean, you could actually, so this could actually be saved to MySQL maybe. The actions get saved. The action gets saved, and to secondary structure. This could be MySQL, Mongo, or Redis. I'm a big fan of Redis. I could send you guys some links on how to build a newsfeed with Redis. I found like a lot of good material. I could just find it again and send it your way. I also yeah, I just gave a presentation on RubyConf Uruguay, yes, like 2 days ago, and I actually talked a little bit about building the newsfeed we built with Redis at HRX. So I could actually send some of that material to you if you guys are interested.
That is very helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. And then C, this is actually summarizing or combining, aggregating, or something like that. So you could just save to MySQL here. And here, it could actually be the event itself. It could actually be the comment you're going to store in the database table, in a comments table, or whatever. Let me break it down. Okay, and this would be, it could be a background job where you save a reference to that comment or update, to the normalized store, save store. And this could be the same thing as this, like this schema I just threw up here with the target ID and action ID. And you could create a concept of timeline if later on you want to see everything someone did. So if you want to access my profile, you see all the photos I published, all the comments I wrote, or anything. Like the concept of timeline, or actually the same way you access someone's Facebook page, someone's profile, and you see everything that person did. And then later on.
So A is basically a list of producer events. Sorry,
Yeah.
B is a list of producer events.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So B is essentially a list of producer events.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I see it. And then it's also good because then you have this reference for later if you want to build a timeline, or if you want to use it for anything. It's just a reference to all of those actions the user performed with in the past. And then you could do this all within the scope of B and C. That would be a background job to send this, and then you could just push that notification, that event, onto relevant feeds. And this would also include an aggregation step. So an aggregation would be something like this. It would be assuming so Netto. I'm following. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to write your name again. Let me just copy it from here. Okay. So I'm following you, Shahqaan. And I'm also following Jonathan from Airpair, right?
Sure.
I'm following you guys. And this is the aggregation step. It would be something like this. Target ID, so you would be, I'll say your ID is S1. You posted a photo, and there's a photo ID, and a timestamp, right? So I'm gonna have to find on my timeline, because I'm one of the relevant followers, and you just posted a photo, or you just commented a photo. Maybe that would be more relevant. Actually, that's gonna make more sense. So just comment on a photo, and at this time, and then you're about to push that event onto my feed. So, and assuming my feed has got some stuff in it, you're gonna have to find within all of these events in my feed if any of them refers to this photo ID, right? Because now you have to aggregate every action for that target, right? So assuming that photo ID shows up here, right? You're gonna have to grab this event, and let's call it E2. And this guy will be E1. I mean EN, whatever, because it's later. Let's call it E20. You're just gonna have to have a function that combines, aggregates E2 and E20 and whatever references that guy. And in the end, you're going to have what I like to call a story. So a story could be something like Shahqaan posted the photo 10 minutes ago. And then Netto commented, I love it. And then later on, Jonathan liked it. You see, you need to actually go through everyone's feed, look for a reference to that target you're acting upon, and then combine that, and combine aggregating it. It's just a matter of including that within the context of that story. And later on, Netto's feed is just a collection of stories. So let's just call it story 1, story 2, story 3. And also based on this, you can decide how you're going to sort your feed. So, problem. How should I sort my feed? So there are a few options. I can make it time sensitive. All based on timestamp of the action, of the last action. So it would be something that every time I act upon a story, every time someone acts upon that story, it gets it brings that up. Like the feed's going to bring it up to the first position, right? So whatever gets updated goes to the top of the feed. That's one way. Another way is you could use a thermodynamic. I'm not sure if that's the way. That's how I should have read it. That's how I spell it. But anyway, you could use a thermodynamic function. And a very good one here is Newton's law of cooling. It's a very cool way to do. I've done it a few times. So the way it works, it's that it works exactly the way, like, you could actually replicate the Newton's law of cooling. There would be something that everything starts really hot, and then there's a decay function that gets applied to it that like diminishes that score over time. So the score is going to start decaying, and every time you act upon that story, it gets a little hotter. But let me see if I can find it. I know a very good blog post about the law of cooling these feeds. Let me see if I can get it here.
On line 67 there, is that a reference to the story, or is that embedded right there?
67?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a reference to whatever story.
Gotcha.
So is this completely denormalized data? Everything you need to show is contained in that story, embedded?
Yeah. So the way, one way I would do, which is the way I did last time, was that I would have it all separate. So I'd have like a denormalized list of actions. They're called timeline. And then later on, I would turn, let me just correct this real quick. I'll have like a separate list that's just a newsfeed that contains all the timelines combined. Know what I mean? And then.
So you have separate timelines for each user.
Yes, one timeline per user.
And one timeline that's combined across all the users.
You could actually have one timeline for users for user, and you can also have one feed per user. And a feed is an aggregation of all of my friend timelines, right? Around the same targets. So for a given target, I aggregate everything my friends did around that target. You know what I mean? So I'll have to combine all of my friends' timelines and find all the targets in common, and then combine everything around those targets. And then later on decide how I want to sort that newsfeed. So one very simple way to start is making it time sensitive. That's the simplest way. Because then you can just sort based on the last action in that feed. And the other one would be the decay function. And then it could be any kind of decay function. The Newton also cooling one is it's a logarithm. It's never gonna get, so the stories get code over time, but the trending ones don't get us code. So it's the same one. So it's a variation of what Hacker News uses. Hacker News uses, and I'm not sure, but I think that's what Reddit is. So I know both of them use a variation of the Newton's law of cooling, and Ahrefs uses it too. Do you guys have any questions around this? I'm gonna send this around. After we're done, I can post it to his chat, or I can send it to your email.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the one feed per user, kind of what that looks like?
I'm sorry? Say that again?
Could you elaborate on the one feed per user, line 79, just a little bit?
Sure. So I'm going to create a few sample timelines. And this would be Netto, light, photo ID, time 10, then John, Mary, so you guys just do another one. No, that's actually not good. So a timeline would be not just timeline. can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Cool. So you can see that this is my timeline. This is Netto's timeline. This is everything I did. So I liked photo A, I liked photo B, I liked photo C, and I liked photo D. At some point in time. Then later on, Mary commented on photo A, and she liked photo Z, and she commented on photo J. Sorry, guys. And then Shahqaan posted photo A, and then later on, Martha liked photo A. And so this is Jonathan's. So this is Jonathan, and he follows Netto, and then Jack, and Martha. Right? So every time one of these guys, Mary, Shahqaan, Martha, every time one of them perform an action, that action gets pushed onto their timelines, right? And now, at some other point in time, we have to build Jonathan feed. And that step would be calling a function that combines timeline, Mary's timeline, timeline, Martha's timeline, right? And combining that would mean finding everything they have done around the same target. So that would mean I'll have to break all the timelines down around the targets. So I would end up having photo A, photo B, photo C, photo E, and photo J, and photo Z. Right? These are all the targets I have. And now I have to create stories for each one of these targets. And create stories for each target. And that would be something like combining. So I know that photo A got a lot of traction. So the story could be okay, posted photo A. Liked by who's liked it? Mary, Martha, Netto, yeah, that's it, and Netto, and then this would be the photo. And someone else commented on it. Oh, so Mary commented on it. Comments. You gotta catch. Right? So this is a story. This is a story around A. So,
Now, is this story owned by Netto here, or is this a story in a sense universal that could apply for multiple users?
So that's actually that's a story that's created specifically for Jonathan, right?
Okay.
Because it only involves um, actions that were performed by his friends,
Okay.
right? And then you also need photo B now. So photo B would be it was just Netto. Netto light photo B. And photo C. Who liked photo C? It was all me. I'm a liker. Like photo C. Then photo B. Photo D. Photo J. Mary. And this is how it goes. So this is actually just like a visual representation of that story. It could be anything. It could be a MySQL table. It could be a string that you could break down, separated by like commas or columns or whatever you're comfortable with. It could be this collection. It could be a text file or anything you want to make with it.
So what would you suggest is a faster way to do it? Do we put it in RAM and cache it for some of the users? Or do we key store it in a MySQL table or a MongoDB for all of the users?
So yeah, that's actually a good question. You mean if you should always have the same stories for everyone and find who should see each one of them, or is that what you can you say that again? I'm not sure I followed.
I'm asking if, okay, I know we are saying stories per user, but this story is specifically created for Jonathan. But we create stories for each of the user, or we somehow optimize it and store some of the stories, some of the users in our RAM.
Mm-hmm.
For the rest of the user, we rebuild the story whenever he logs in.
I see. So I think it all depends on the kind of like on what you see for your application right now. So if you feel like you need that all the stories are going to be relevant for everyone, maybe you could reuse the same stories, and it doesn't really matter. I think that's the way Facebook does it, because you don't you see what people from like other friends networks like what they did with that, what they commented, what they liked. If one of your friends is part of the story, right? And that would actually be a very cheap way to do it, because then you could just reuse those stories for everyone, and that would be great. And then for that, you could just use MySQL right away. So you could just summarize all of those actions and update all those stories, and that could actually be the simplest way to go. So you could definitely do something like that. So every time someone performs an action, you store that on a timeline, and very quickly you just go through every story it's part of, and then just update that story with that action, and then we don't have to do anything else. Then it's just a matter of like rendering those stories on the screen. Yeah, and then you could just use because you're not gonna have too much. You're probably not gonna have that much traffic if you have like very good MySQL indexes. You don't even have to just throw in another technology into the stack. So you could just go in MySQL. I would go in MySQL right away.
Do you have any advice around line number 110, 109, 110? It seems like, I guess, it's just going to be a pain in the ass. You got to crawl through all those timeline events.
Yeah, then I mean, if you go with that approach of just reusing the same stories, you don't need this part anymore.
Okay.
You might not need this anymore.
But you still need to kind of you need to determine what stories to update based on the targets and all.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be painful.
Otherwise, you could just do create global stories and show what's relevant to show what's relevant.
I think, yeah, what you're typing there, I think that approach might be good for us because stories tend to be somewhat global within a neighborhood, and you can either view the story or not view the story.
Oh, I see. Oh yeah, that could actually work really well for you guys. Yeah. Mm. Do you guys have any other questions around this? I don't know. Do you guys like this idea? Do you guys
Seems good.
want
Very smart.
Yeah.
Let's see. What about stories which would it ever make sense if we reached a point where we kind of do federate databases a little bit based on neighborhood or geography? How can we kind of handle global events which kind of bridge neighborhoods, given that 90% of the stories are still within a neighborhood? So the timber bridge.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Is it a separate kind of database and just kind of pull from both a little bit somehow, or?
Yeah, that could actually be. Let me think. So yeah, assuming you could have a separate table for, I don't know, hot topics or something like that, and then later, if you need to combine all of those guys, you could just pick the top ones from like this separate table or you could just have a flag on every row that says if that's urgent or not, if that's like a hot topic or not, and then you could also actually promote with that neural law cooling. If you build a function that works like very well, popular events are gonna go. They're gonna start like they're gonna start like going up, and then they're gonna make it to the top of the feed. And then what you could do is that you could summarize whatever is on top of everyone's feed. You could just turn them into like very important events, or you could do it manually too if you need to. Yeah, that could be one way. You could just go through like every single database of those and get the first row on the or the first 5 rows or something. Yeah.
So, so I want to ask a very good question. Recommendation, the feed application basically will just save the event. For example, I created a post. Feed does not own that post. Feed will only own the event of that happening.
I'm sorry, like you kind of broke up a little bit. So you're asking if every time you comment on something and you're going to store this as part of the feed, if you would store just a reference to that action? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So you could actually go. One thing you could do is that you could store the reference. So if that comment gets updated, it gets updated right away in the feed. So the feed is just a compilation of the IDs, and then later on you have to go back to the database and look them up. That's one way to guarantee your feed is always fresh. It always has like the most relevant data. Another way you could do is that you could save a JSON representation or a string representation of whatever happened. And by doing that, you eliminate all the lookups you're going to have to do to the database, right? I mean, all the extra joins and everything, but to the cost that your feed might be outdated. I mean, the comment might be outdated, the timestamps could be outdated if you unlike, and like it again, because then the timestamp's going to change. And I think it's just a matter of like how much you want to compromise. I think that's because it's just starting now, and you're probably not going to have that much traffic. And if you have very good indexes in the database, you could just do all of those joins very very quickly. So I would just store the IDs from now, because that's what I did in the last feed I built on Atrax, and we got like, I don't know, 1.5 million users, like active users on the feed right now, and we're looking up everything by ID, because we haven't, like, if you just use primary keys, it should be fine.
Our application is actually broken down into multiple services, so user and business data exist in their own service, and we normally have to make a join, but we have to make an HTTP request to get their data.
Oh, I see. So then it might actually be a good idea to just like store a JSON representation or anything, and then if it gets invalidated, you could just rebuild it every time you rebuild the feed. Every time you update the story, you could just get the latest, and that would actually guarantee that you always have the latest. It would just be a little more work, because then you have to pull it and update everything.
But there will be a bit more latency. As in, there will be a time when some of the users might be seeing outdated code.
Yeah, there might be.
Avoid that.
I'm sorry?
Or is there a way to avoid that?
Let me think. Well, you could always send some metadata along with the event every time you push it to the feed, and then that story is going to get refreshed, and it's going to have the latest one. But then for that, every time someone edits an action, you would have to send an action again. You'd have to send it again and just like flatten it. And you're going to have to find the duplicates, merge them, and use the latest metadata.
It's kind of a slightly different topic. We're considering using RabbitMQ to kind of push some of these events to the feeds application, to the feed service. Do you have much experience with RabbitMQ? Any guidance there?
I haven't used it. I have worked mostly with, I used ResQ back in the day. I used Sidekick, like these days I've been using Sidekick. But I guess it's the same principle. So I guess it wouldn't be too much different. It all depends on the kind of of how you're going to do the background jobs. So if you're going to do it in Ruby, I would definitely recommend Sidekick. But I don't know like much more for other technologies.
Cool.
But I guess it should be the same. It's the same principle behind it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Netto. I guess our time's up at the moment. We might set up another April with you getting the details of this.
Cool. Yeah.
Can you send me this?
Sure.
These notes and a couple of links you were mentioning about Redis and newsfeed.
Of course, yeah, I can do it. I'll send what I have right now, and then tomorrow when I have some time, I'll do some research and get all the links and send it your way.
Guys, also just so you know, I'm gonna pop a link to the recording, so you'll be able to watch back the whole session.
Alright, that's good.
Cool.
That sounds great.
Alright, everyone, well, good night, get some sleep, and I'll ping you both tomorrow.
I'm sorry, guys. The call is breaking a lot. I cannot follow you anymore.
It's okay. Yeah. Thanks for your time, man.
Thanks for the time. Really.
Cool.
Have a nice night.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.